The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan, and every patron inside had stopped eating to watch the confrontation unfolding at Table 7. Victoria Ashworth Sterling, heiress to a $12 billion empire, stood with her designer heels planted firmly on the marble floor, staring down at a man who had just spilled an entire bowl of spaghetti carbonara across her white Valentino dress. But here's the thing that nobody expected. She wasn't angry about the dress. She was angry because she recognized him. And what she was about to say would change both of their lives forever. "You're the one," Victoria whispered, her perfectly manicured hand trembling as she pointed at him. "You're the man from the fertility clinic waiting room. The one who said the cruelest thing anyone has ever said to me." The man looked up, sauce dripping from his sleeve, his 6-year-old daughter clutching his leg in terror. Recognition dawned in his dark eyes, and for a moment, the chaos of the restaurant faded into silence. "Oh no," he muttered. "You're the ice queen who made my daughter cry." What happened next? Well, to understand that, we need to go back exactly 37 days, to the moment when Victoria Ashworth Sterling made a decision that would bring her entire carefully constructed world crashing down around her. Victoria had spent her entire 34 years building walls. Not the kind you could see, but the kind that kept everyone at a calculated distance. With her flowing dark hair that cascaded like silk past her shoulders, her porcelain skin that had graced the covers of magazines, and a figure that made designers beg her to wear their clothes, she could have had anyone. But that was precisely the problem. Everyone wanted something from her. They wanted her money, her connections, her influence. Nobody had ever wanted just her. She sat in her corner office on the 47th floor of Ashworth Tower, watching the sunset paint the New York skyline in shades of gold and crimson, and she felt absolutely nothing. The emptiness had become so familiar that she barely noticed it anymore. It was like a hollow space inside her chest where something warm should have been. Her phone buzzed with another message from her mother, demanding to know when she would finally settle down and produce an heir for the family empire. As if she were a breeding mare. As if her entire purpose in life was to continue a bloodline she had never asked to be part of. "Ms. Ashworth Sterling?" Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 3 o'clock appointment at the fertility clinic is confirmed." Victoria closed her eyes and took a breath. This was her solution. Clinical. Controlled. She would have a baby on her own terms, without the complications of love or marriage or any of the messy emotional entanglements that had destroyed her parents' relationship. She would select a donor from a catalog like choosing a fine wine, and she would raise a child who would never have to witness the kind of bitter hatred she had grown up with. It was a perfect plan. Foolproof. Completely logical. So why did she feel like crying? Across the city, in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, Marcus Chen was having the worst day of his life. Which was saying something, because the past 2 years had been a continuous parade of terrible days. Ever since his wife had walked out, leaving him alone with their 4-year-old daughter Lily and a stack of divorce papers, Marcus had been running on coffee, determination, and the kind of exhausted love that only single parents truly understand. Today, his boss had informed him that the architectural firm was downsizing, and despite his talent, despite the award-winning designs he had created, he was being let go. Budget cuts, they said. Nothing personal, they said. But as Marcus walked out of that building with a box of his belongings, it felt extremely personal. He stood on the sidewalk, rain beginning to fall, and realized he had exactly $47 in his bank account, a rent payment due in 3 days, and a daughter who was expecting him to pick her up from kindergarten with a smile on his face. Marcus was handsome in that effortless way that he had never quite believed. His athletic build came from years of playing basketball and chasing after a hyperactive child, not from expensive gym memberships. His skin was a warm honey tone, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes held a depth that women found magnetic. But more than his looks, it was his humor that drew people in. He could find something funny in the darkest moments, crack a joke that would make you laugh even when you wanted to cry. It was his defense mechanism, his armor against a world that kept trying to knock him down. He picked up Lily from school, her tiny hand slipping into his as she chattered about her day, and he made a decision. He needed to sell his genetic material. It sounded absurd, almost laughable, but the fertility clinic downtown paid good money for donors, and Marcus was desperate enough to swallow his pride. The clinic was sterile and white, filled with wealthy-looking women flipping through binders of donor profiles like they were shopping for a new handbag. Marcus sat in the waiting room, filling out forms that asked invasive questions about his medical history, his education, his hobbies. Lily sat beside him, coloring in a book he had bought her from the dollar store. That's when Victoria walked in. She swept through the doors like she owned the place, and honestly, she probably could have bought it with her pocket change. Her designer coat probably cost more than Marcus's car. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist, her posture perfect, her expression as cold and distant as a winter moon. Lily looked up from her coloring book, and because she was 6 and had no filter, she said loudly, "Daddy, why does that lady look so sad?" Every head in the waiting room turned. Victoria's perfectly composed mask cracked for just a moment, a flash of something vulnerable crossing her features before she rebuilt her walls. She looked down at Lily with an expression that Marcus couldn't quite read. "I'm not sad," Victoria said, her voice crisp. "I'm busy." "There's a difference." Marcus put his arm around Lily protectively. "She didn't mean anything by it. She's just a kid." Victoria's eyes swept over him, cataloging his second-hand jacket, his worn shoes, the coffee stain on his sleeve that he hadn't had time to notice. Her lip curled slightly. "Perhaps you should teach your child that it's rude to comment on strangers." Something hot and defensive surged in Marcus's chest. "Perhaps you should teach yourself that not everyone is beneath your contempt." Their eyes locked, and the temperature in the waiting room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The other patients looked away, pretending to be fascinated by their phones or the magazines on the table. But Marcus and Victoria remained frozen in that moment, two people who had somehow managed to push each other's buttons within 30 seconds of meeting. "Your form, sir," a nurse called out, breaking the tension. Marcus stood, lifting Lily into his arms. As he passed Victoria, he couldn't help himself. That sharp wit, that defensive humor, it came out before he could stop it. "I hope whoever ends up with your genetics has a better personality," he muttered. Victoria's gasp of outrage followed him down the hallway, and Marcus felt a small, petty satisfaction. It was immature and unprofessional, and he would later regret it deeply. But in that moment, it felt good to knock that look of superiority off her perfect face. But now, you might be wondering. How did these two people, who clearly despised each other from that first moment, end up in a situation where Victoria would ask Marcus for a baby? What could possibly bridge that gap between hatred and something that looked almost like need? Well, the universe has a twisted sense of humor, and fate was about to throw them together in ways neither of them could have ever imagined. 3 weeks passed. Marcus didn't get approved as a donor because of some minor anomaly in his blood work that turned out to be nothing, but by the time the retests came back, he had already found a new job at a smaller firm that actually appreciated his talent. Things were looking up. He could breathe again. Victoria, meanwhile, had received news that shattered her careful plans. A rare condition. Her chances of conceiving, even with assisted reproduction, were practically non-existent. The doctor had been kind about it, using words like miracle and never say never, but Victoria understood statistics. She understood reality. She sat in her penthouse apartment that night, surrounded by more luxury than most people could imagine, and she cried for the first time in years. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "The Ashworth legacy depends on you, Victoria. Don't disappoint me like you've disappointed me in everything else." There had to be another way. She began researching, and what she found led her down a path she never expected. Surrogacy was complicated, expensive, emotionally fraught. But co-parenting? Intentional co-parenting with someone who wanted to be involved, who would share the responsibility and the joy. It was unconventional. It was crazy. It was everything Victoria usually avoided. But something about it felt right. The problem was finding the right person. She interviewed candidates like she was hiring for a position at her company. Men with impressive resumes, impeccable backgrounds, genetic profiles that would make any eugenicist weep with joy. But something was always missing. They were too eager, too polished, too obviously interested in her money. And then she remembered him. The man from the waiting room. The one with the sharp tongue and the sharper eyes. The one who had looked at her not with greed or admiration, but with genuine anger. The one who clearly loved his daughter more than anything in the world. She told herself it was logical. He was already a proven father. He had no interest in her money. He was healthy, intelligent, and genetically diverse enough from her own background to ensure strong offspring. She didn't admit, even to herself, that she kept thinking about the way his eyes had flashed when he defended his daughter. That she had dreamed about him twice, dreams that left her feeling warm and confused when she woke. Finding him was easy. She had resources that could track down anyone. What wasn't easy was working up the nerve to approach him. But Victoria Ashworth Sterling had never let fear stop her from getting what she wanted. Marcus was working late at his new office, Lily at her grandmother's for the night, when his phone rang with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Telemarketers had been relentless lately. Mr. Chen? The voice was cool, professional, but there was something familiar about it that made his spine straighten. This is Victoria Ashworth Sterling. We met at the Westside Fertility Clinic 3 weeks ago. I believe you insulted my personality. Marcus nearly dropped his phone. How did you get this number? That's not important. What is important is that I have a business proposition for you. I'd like to meet tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. Ristorante Alessandro on 5th Avenue. Are you serious? I'm always serious, Mr. Chen. Wear something presentable. She hung up before he could respond. Marcus stared at his phone for a long moment, his mind racing. He should ignore this. He should block her number and forget that arrogant, infuriating woman had ever existed. But curiosity was a powerful thing. And despite everything, he found himself wanting to know what could possibly make someone like Victoria Ashworth Sterling seek out someone like him. He showed up the next evening in his best suit, the one he'd worn to his brother's wedding 4 years ago. It still fit, mostly. The restaurant was the kind of place that made him feel like an imposter the moment he walked in, all crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths and waiters who looked like they had master's degrees in condescension. Victoria was already there, seated at a private table in the back, looking like she belonged in a painting. Her hair was down tonight, falling in glossy waves past her shoulders. Her dress was deep burgundy, elegant but somehow less armor-like than her previous outfits. And when she looked up at him, there was something in her eyes that looked almost like nervousness. "You came," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." Marcus sat down across from her. "Honestly, I almost didn't. You weren't exactly friendly last time we met. Neither were you. You implied I was a bad father. You implied I had a terrible personality." They stared at each other, and then something unexpected happened. Victoria's lips twitched. Marcus felt his own mouth curve upward. And suddenly, they were both trying not to smile, two adversaries recognizing something familiar in each other's stubbornness. "Okay," Marcus said. "I'm here. What's this about?" Victoria took a breath. "I want a baby. Can you help?" The words landed between them like a bomb. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. Whatever he had expected, it wasn't this. "Why me?" The question came out rougher than he intended. "You clearly have unlimited resources. You could have anyone." "I don't want anyone." Victoria's voice was steady, but Marcus could see her fingers trembling slightly against her wine glass. I want someone who won't use me, who doesn't care about my money, who actually knows how to raise a child with love. I've done my research. You're an excellent father, Mr. Chen. Your daughter is thriving despite your circumstances. That matters more to me than any genetic profile. Marcus leaned back in his chair, struggling to process what he was hearing. So what, you want me to be a sperm donor? Because I tried that and it didn't exactly work out. No. Victoria met his eyes directly. I want a co-parent. Someone who will be involved, who will share custody, who will be a real father to this child. Not just genetic material. A partner in this endeavor. You want to have a baby with a stranger. We don't have to be strangers. For the first time, her composure cracked a little. We could get to know each other. See if it would work. I'm not proposing we do this blindly. I'm proposing we try. Marcus was silent for a long moment, his mind spinning with the impossibility of this situation. This beautiful, arrogant, wealthy woman wanted to have a child with him. A single dad from Brooklyn who couldn't even keep a steady job until recently. You're insane, he said finally. Victoria's expression flickered with hurt before she rebuilt her walls. Perhaps. But I'm also desperate. And I think, underneath all that defensive humor, so are you. The words hit closer to home than Marcus wanted to admit. He thought about Lily, about how much he wished she had siblings, about how lonely single parenthood could be. He thought about his own dreams of a bigger family, dreams he had buried when his wife left. Even if I considered this madness, he said slowly, why would someone like you possibly want someone like me? We're from different worlds. Victoria's voice softened in a way he hadn't heard before. Because when I saw you with your daughter in that waiting room, I saw something I've never had. Real love. Unconditional love. And I want my child to have that. More than money, more than privilege, more than all the opportunities my family name could provide. I want them to be loved the way you love Lily. The waiter chose that moment to appear at their table, completely oblivious to the emotional earthquake happening in front of him. Are you ready to order? Marcus looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Marcus. And despite everything, despite the ridiculousness of the situation, he found himself saying, I think we're going to need some time. But what happened next would test everything Marcus thought he knew about love, about trust, and about the thin line between wanting someone and needing them. Because getting to know Victoria Ashworth Sterling would prove to be the most complicated, infuriating, and unexpectedly beautiful experience of his life. They agreed to meet 3 times a week. Getting to know each other, as Victoria put it. Like dating, but with paperwork and legal contracts and none of the normal expectations of romance. The first few meetings were awkward. Marcus felt out of place in her world of 5-star restaurants and luxury apartments. Victoria seemed equally uncomfortable when he insisted on meeting at a diner near his place, or when Lily was present and demanded attention with the unfiltered enthusiasm of a 6-year-old. But slowly, something shifted. Victoria, it turned out, was not the ice queen she pretended to be. Beneath the designer clothes and the haughty expressions was a woman who had been told her entire life that she wasn't good enough. Her mother was a monster, though Victoria never used that word. She spoke of expectations and disappointments, of a childhood spent performing for approval that never came. I was never allowed to be messy, Victoria confessed one evening, watching Lily paint with her fingers at Marcus's kitchen table. If I got dirty, there were consequences. If I was too loud, too emotional, too anything, I was punished. Not physically. But in ways that still hurt. Marcus listened, and something in his heart that had been closed off started to crack open. Victoria, in turn, was fascinated by his chaos. His apartment was small and cluttered, toys scattered everywhere, art projects taped to the refrigerator. It was warm in a way her penthouse had never been. How do you do it? she asked one night, genuinely curious. How do you stay so optimistic when things keep falling apart? Marcus shrugged, flashing that charming grin that was starting to make Victoria's pulse do strange things. What's the alternative? Being miserable? Tried that. Didn't care for it. That's not a real answer. Okay, real answer. He leaned forward, his expression growing serious. I stay optimistic because of Lily. Because she's watching. And the way I handle hard times is the way she'll learn to handle hers. So I have to get back up. I have to keep laughing. Because that's what I want for her. Victoria felt tears pricking her eyes, which horrified her. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in years. You're a good man, Marcus Chen. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. She reached across the table and, hesitantly, touched his hand. I'm impressed. There's a difference. The touch sent electricity up both their arms. They pulled back quickly, both pretending nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something was changing. The banter became flirtier. The looks lingered longer. Marcus found himself thinking about Victoria when she wasn't around, wondering what she was doing, whether she was eating properly or working herself to death as she tended to do. Victoria found herself smiling at her phone when his texts came through, little jokes and observations about his day, photos of Lily's latest artwork, random thoughts that made her feel included in his life. One night, walking back from dinner, the rain started without warning. They ducked under an awning, pressed close together in the small space. You know, Marcus said, his voice low, when we first met, I thought you were the most insufferable person I'd ever encountered. The feeling was mutual, Victoria replied, but she was smiling. And now? Now I think you're only the third most insufferable. She laughed, a real laugh, not the polite society version she usually deployed. Marcus felt it hit him in the chest like an arrow. Who's first and second? She asked. My ex-wife and her new husband. Fair enough. Victoria looked up at him, rain misting around them, her eyes reflecting the city lights. For what it's worth, I think you're only moderately annoying now. High praise from the Ice Queen. Don't call me that. Why not? Because when you say it, it doesn't sound like an insult anymore. And that terrifies me. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Marcus reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. His hand cupped her cheek, gentle and warm. Would it be crossing a line if I kissed you? He asked. We haven't even decided if we're doing this baby thing yet. That's not what I asked. Victoria's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Maybe some lines need to be crossed. He kissed her under the awning while the rain fell around them, and Victoria felt something she had never experienced before. Safety. Belonging. Like she had been wandering through a storm her whole life and had finally found shelter. But happiness, in Victoria's experience, never lasted. And just when she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different, her mother arrived. Elizabeth Ashworth was a woman who had turned manipulation into an art form. Elegant, powerful, and absolutely merciless, she descended on Victoria's penthouse like a tornado. I've heard rumors, Elizabeth announced, sweeping past Victoria into the living room. You've been seen with some nobody from Brooklyn. Please tell me you're not actually considering throwing away the Ashworth legacy for a fling. Victoria's walls came slamming back up. My personal life is not your concern, Mother. Everything about you is my concern. You are my only child, my only chance at securing this family's future. I will not allow you to ruin everything because you've suddenly developed sentimentality. I haven't developed anything. I'm simply exploring options. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed. Options that involve a penniless single father? Victoria, be serious. If you want a child so badly, we can arrange something suitable. I know several appropriate families who would be willing to. I don't want suitable. Victoria's voice cracked with emotion she usually kept buried. I want real. I want something that isn't measured in net worth and social standing. I want what you never gave me. The slap came fast and unexpected. Victoria's cheek stung, tears springing to her eyes. You ungrateful girl. Elizabeth's voice was ice. Everything you have, everything you are, is because of me. And if you continue down this path, I will make sure that man's life becomes a living hell. I will destroy his career, his reputation, his relationship with his daughter. Do you understand me? Victoria understood. She understood with perfect, crystalline clarity. And she felt her heart breaking. She pulled back from Marcus. Made excuses. Cancelled meetings. When he texted, she responded with single words or not at all. When he showed up at her building, she had security turn him away. Marcus was bewildered, then hurt, then angry. He didn't understand what had changed, why she had suddenly become the Ice Queen again after letting him see the real woman underneath. Maybe it was never real, he told his mother, bouncing Lily on his knee. Maybe she was just playing a game. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. He had seen her tears. He had felt her tremble in his arms. Whatever was happening, there was more to it than Victoria's cold shoulder. 3 weeks passed. The longest 3 weeks of both their lives. And then the universe, with its twisted sense of humor, threw them together again. At the same restaurant where this whole thing started. With a bowl of spaghetti carbonara between them. You're the man from the fertility clinic, Victoria said, staring at him with something like despair in her eyes. And you're the Ice Queen, Marcus replied, sauce dripping from his sleeve. But then Lily, who had been terrified by the commotion, recognized Victoria too. Daddy, it's the sad lady. The pretty one from the clinic. Victoria looked down at the little girl, and her carefully reconstructed walls crumbled. She knelt down, designer dress ruined beyond repair, and said, "Hello, Lily. I'm sorry I scared you. I'm sorry for a lot of things." She looked up at Marcus, tears streaming down her face, completely uncaring of who was watching. I need to tell you the truth. About why I pushed you away. About my mother. About everything. The restaurant was completely silent. Every person watched as Victoria Ashworth Sterling, billionaire heiress, knelt on the floor in a ruined dress and bared her soul to a single dad from Brooklyn. And Marcus, looking down at her, made a choice. Not here, he said quietly. He extended his hand. Come with me. Both of you need to talk to me. But not here. They ended up at a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away, the kind of place Victoria would never have entered a few months ago. Lily fell asleep in the booth, her head in Victoria's lap, while Victoria told Marcus everything. About her mother's threats. About her fears. About how she had convinced herself she was protecting him by staying away. She'll destroy you, Victoria whispered. She has that power. She's done it before. Marcus listened. And then he did something Victoria never expected. He laughed. Victoria. I've been broke. I've been abandoned. I've been at rock bottom so many times I'm starting to think I own property there. Your mother doesn't scare me. She should. Maybe. But here's the thing. He reached across the table and took her hand. I've spent the last 3 weeks miserable. I've spent them missing you like crazy. And I realized something. Being safe isn't worth it if I'm not happy. And you make me happy. Infuriating as you are. Victoria let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You make me happy too. Which is terrifying. So let's be terrified together. Marcus squeezed her hand. Let's do this crazy thing. Let's have a baby, build a life, face whatever your mother throws at us. Together. She'll make our lives difficult. So? Life's already difficult. At least this way I get to face it with someone who makes me laugh. When she's not making me want to pull my hair out. Victoria looked at him, this impossible man who had crashed into her carefully controlled world and refused to leave. And she made a choice too. Okay, she whispered. Together. The wedding was small. Intimate. Everything Victoria's mother would have hated. They held it in Marcus's mother's backyard, surrounded by family and friends, with Lily as the flower girl. Elizabeth Ashworth tried to follow through on her threats. She reached out to Marcus's new employers, spread rumors, made difficulties wherever she could. But something she hadn't anticipated happened. Victoria fought back. Armed with years of knowledge about her mother's secrets, her shady business dealings, her carefully hidden scandals, Victoria went to war. She called in favors, made alliances, threatened consequences. It was the first time she had ever stood up to her mother, and it was glorious. You think you can defeat me? Elizabeth hissed during their final confrontation. I don't need to defeat you, Victoria replied calmly. I just need you to understand that hurting my family comes with a price. One you're not willing to pay. Elizabeth backed down. Not gracefully, but completely. And Victoria, for the first time in her life, felt truly free. A year later, Victoria sat in the hospital, exhausted and radiant, holding their newborn daughter. Grace Chin Ashworth. Named for the quality Victoria had spent her whole life learning, and that Marcus had taught her to embrace. Lily sat on the bed beside them, fascinated by her new sister. Marcus stood with his arm around Victoria, tears streaming down his face that he didn't bother to hide. You know, he said, when we first met, I never imagined this. Neither did I. Victoria looked up at him with eyes full of love. Thank you. For what? For showing me that it was possible. All of this. A family. Love. Being happy. She reached up to touch his face. I spent my whole life believing I didn't deserve it. You proved me wrong. Marcus kissed her forehead. You deserved it all along. You just needed someone stubborn enough to make you see it. Daddy, Lily interrupted, can I hold her now? They laughed, carefully arranging the baby in Lily's arms while hovering protectively. And in that moment, surrounded by the family she had built against all odds, Victoria understood something profound. Life wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about control, or money, or meeting anyone's expectations. It was about connection. Love. The messy, complicated, beautiful reality of building something real with people who mattered. She had spent her whole life running from vulnerability, believing it made her weak. But standing here now, heart wide open, she had never felt stronger. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in Victoria's story, the feeling of being unworthy, of building walls because you're afraid of being hurt, I want you to know something. Those walls might feel like protection, but they're actually prisons. And the bravest thing you can do is let someone in. It might not work out perfectly. It probably won't. But the alternative, living your whole life safe and alone, isn't really living at all. So take the risk. Open your heart. Let yourself be seen. Because the love you're afraid to pursue might just be the love that changes everything. And speaking of love and connection, if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Every like and subscription helps us create more content like this, stories about love, hope, and the courage to be vulnerable. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss another video. Your support means everything to us, and it helps us keep bringing these stories to life. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from today? What country are you in? I love knowing that these stories reach people all around the world, and I read every single comment. Let's build a community together. Tell me your story. Until next time, remember. You are worthy of love. You are capable of change. And the best parts of your story might still be waiting to be written.